Thank you all for coming tonight to our last performance of The Importance of Being Earnest. While I have you with undivided attention before you start checking out as I chatter on, let's make sure all your cell phones are off, all your electronic devices are off, and let's keep them off for the whole evening, because when you turn it on to check a text or a message in the middle of the show, someone sitting next to you also then has to have that experience of your cell phone going on. And since we're trying to establish the world of 1895, I'm going to invite you for these 3 acts to do it as they would have been without those electronic devices, okay? We have our shows in 3 acts. We have 2 intermissions. I just think it's a kind thing to let you know how they go. The first one is around 35 to 40 minutes. The second one is probably around 50 minutes, and the last one is 25 to 30. So the last one is quick. Mr. Wilde actually wrote the play in 5 acts, but we will be doing the 3-act modern version of it. So we hope that suits you. When the show is over, please do not go on the stage, and please do not go out this door or to the area where our actors have their dressing room. If you wait right outside or right in here, as soon as they're changed, they'll come out and greet you, but we ask that no one, of course, go onto the stage or go back to that area. They'll come to you. What am I forgetting? I want to thank everyone who's worked so hard on this show, and I want to thank all of you for your support over the past year as we have started, as we fundraised to upgrade this room. If you haven't been in it since last year, you'll see we have lost our ceiling tiles, we have the risers, we have new chairs, and we have a wonderful new stage lighting system. And we have, I don't remember what they're calling it, I call it the monolith back there, but we are really working with the NPR to get it to be a really top-rate performance space for all our kids. And we couldn't do it without you. We couldn't do it without you because we wouldn't have the kids or the support, and I thank you all very, very, very much. The cast has worked hard. They've been a pleasure, and I hope you enjoy this performance.
Did you hear what I was playing, Len?
I didn't think it polite to listen, sir.
I'm sorry for that. For your sake, I don't play accurately. Anyone can play accurately, but I play with a wonderful expression. As far as the piano is concerned, sentiment is my forte. I keep science for life.
Yes, sir.
And speaking of the science of life, have you got the cucumber sandwiches cut for me, Brock?
Yes, sir.
Oh, by the way, Lane, I see from your book that on Thursday night, when Lord Shawman and Mr. Worthing were dining with me, 8 bottles of champagne are entered as having been consumed.
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
Why is it that at a bachelor's establishment, the servants invariably drink the champagne? I ask merely for information.
I attribute it to the superior quality of the wine, sir. I have often observed that in married households, the champagne is rarely of a first-rate brand.
Good heavens, as marriage so demoralizing as that?
I believe it is a pleasant state, sir. I have had little experience of it myself up to the present. I have only been married once, and that was in consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person.
I don't know that I'm much interested in your family life, Lane.
No, sir. It is not a very interesting subject. I never think of it much myself.
Very naturally, I'm sure. That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. Really, if the lower orders don't set us a good example, what on earth is the use of them? They seem as a class to have absolutely no sense of moral responsibility.
Mr. Ernest Worthing.
How are you, my dear Earnest? What brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. What else should bring anyone anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, dear Algie.
I believe it is customary in good society to take some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since Thursday?
Oh, in the country.
What on earth do you do there?
When one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses others. It is excessively boring.
And who are the people you amuse?
Oh, neighbours, neighbours.
Got nice neighbours in your port of Shropshire?
Perfectly horrid. Don't speak to one of them.
How immensely you must amuse them. By the way, Shropshire is your county, is it not?
Shropshire. Yes, of course. Hello. Why all these cups? Why cucumber sandwiches? Why such a reckless extravagance in one so young? Who is coming to tea?
Merely Aunt Augusta and Gwendolyn.
How perfectly delightful.
Yes, that is all very well. But I'm afraid Aunt Augusta won't quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
My dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolyn is perfectly disgraceful. It is almost as bad as the way Gwendolyn flirts with you.
I am in love with Gwendolyn. I've come up to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you would come up for pleasure. I call that a business.
Ugh, how utterly unromantic you are, Algie.
I really don't see anything romantic in proposing. It is very romantic to be in love, but there is nothing romantic in a definite proposal. Why, one may be accepted. One usually is, I believe. Then the excitement is all over. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. If ever I get married, I'll certainly try to forget the fact.
I don't doubt that. The divorce court was specially invented for people whose memories were so curiously constituted.
Oh, there is no use speculating on that subject. Divorces are made in heaven. Please don't touch the cucumber sandwiches. They're ordered specially for Aunt Augusta.
But you have been eating them all the time.
This is quite a different matter. She is my aunt. Have some bread and butter. The bread and butter is for Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn is devoted to bread and butter.
And very good bread and butter it is too.
Well, my dear fellow, you need not eat as if you were going to eat the whole thing. You behave as if you were married to her already. You are not married to her already, and I don't believe you ever will be.
Why on earth do you say that?
Well, in the first place, girls never marry the men they flirt with. Girls don't think it's right.
Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't. It is a great truth. It accounts for the extraordinary number of bachelors one sees all over the place. In the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolyn is perfectly disgraceful. I'm sorry. The Gwendolyn is my first cousin, and before I allow you to marry her, you will have to clear up the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? What on earth do you mean by Cecily? Algie, I don't know a Cecily.
Bring me that cigarette case Mr. Worthing left in the dining room the last time he smoked here.
Yes, sir.
Do you mean to say you've had my cigarette case all this time? I wish to goodness you would have told me. I've been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard. I was nearly offering a very large reward.
Well, I wish you would offer one. I happen to be more than usually hard up.
Well, there is no point in offering a reward now that the thing is found.
I think that is rather mean of you, Ernest, I must say. However, it makes no matter, for now that I look at the inscription inside, I find that the thing is in yours after all.
Of course it is mine. You've seen it with me 100 times. You have no right whatsoever to look through my cigarette case. It's very ungentlemanly to read what is inside a private cigarette case.
Oh, it is absurd to have a hard and fast rule about what one should read and what one shouldn't. More than half of modern culture depends on what one shouldn't read.
I don't doubt the fact, and I don't propose on discussing modern culture. It isn't the sort of thing one does in private. I just simply want my cigarette case back.
Yes, but this isn't your cigarette case. This cigarette case is a present from someone of the name of Cecily, and you said you didn't know anyone of that name.
Well, if you really want to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes, charming old lady she is, lives at Tunbridge Wells. Now give it back to me.
Yes, but why does she call herself Little Cecily if she is your aunt and lives at Tunbridge Wells?
Oh, my old boy, what is there in that? Some aunts are tall, some aunts are not tall. That is a matter that surely an aunt may be able to decide for herself. You seem to think all aunts should be exactly like your aunt. That is absurd. Now, just give it back to me, Algie.
Yes, but why does your aunt call you her uncle? From little Cecily, with her fondest love to her dear Uncle Jack. There is no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt, but why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call her own nephew her uncle, I can't quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all, it is Earnest.
It isn't Ernest, it's Jack.
You have always told me it was Ernest. You look as if your name was Earnest. You are the most earnest-looking person I ever met in my life. It is perfectly absurd you're saying your name isn't Ernest. It's on one of your cards. Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4 the Albany. I'll keep this as proof your name is Ernest if ever you attempt to deny it to me, to Gwendolyn, or to anyone else.
Well, my name is Jack in town, and, Ernest in town and Jack in the country, and the cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but that does not account for the fact that your small Aunt Cecily calls you her dear uncle. Come, old boy. You would much better have the thing out at once.
Oh, you talk exactly as if you were a dentist. It's very vulgar for one to talk as if you were a dentist when one isn't a dentist. It produces a false impression.
That is exactly what dentists always do. Now, tell me the whole thing. And might I say that I've always suspected you of being a secret and confirmed bumperist, and I'm quite sure of it now.
Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by Bunburyist?
I'll reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you are kind enough to inform me why you are Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
Well, produce my cigarette case first.
Here it is. Now, produce your explanation, and pray make it improbable.
Yes, well, you see, there's nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, it is rather ordinary. The old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy, named me in his will guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who calls me uncle under motives of respect you cannot possibly appreciate, lives in my place in the country, under the charge of her admirable governess, Miss Prism.
And where is that place in the country, by the way?
That is nothing to you, dear boy. You will never be invited. And I can tell you quite candidly that the place is not in Shropshire.
I suspected that, my dear fellow. I've buried all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now, tell me, why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
Well, I'm not sure you will be able to understand my real motives, for you are hardly serious enough. You see, when one is put in the position of guardian, one must adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. It is his duty to do so. And as for a high moral tone can't be said to conduce much for one's health and one's happiness, I have always pretended to have a younger brother named Earnest who lives in the Albany. Ernest gets into the most dreadful of scrapes. That is all. That is the truth, pure and simple.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. Modern life would be very tedious if it were either, and modern literature a complete impossibility.
That would not be a bad thing at all.
Literary criticism is not my forte. Don't try it. You should leave that to people who haven't been at a university. I do it so well in the daily papers. What you really are is a bumperist. I was quite right in saying you are a bumperist. You're one of the most advanced bumperists I know.
Algie, what do you mean by Bunburyist?
You have invented a very useful younger brother called Earnest, in order that you may be able to cover the town as often as you like. I have invented a permanent invalid called Bunbury, in order that I may be able to go down into the country whenever I choose. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it weren't for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, I wouldn't be able to dine with you tonight at Willis's. For I've really been engaged to Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
I have not asked you to dine anywhere with me tonight.
Yes, you're absurdly careless with sending out invitations. It's very foolish of you. No,
I think you better dine with your aunt tonight.
I haven't the smallest intention of doing anything of the kind. To begin with, I dine there on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, whenever I do dine there, I'm always treated as a member of the family, and I'm sent down with either no women at all, or 2. In the third place, I know perfectly well who should be placed me next to tonight. she will place me next to Mary Farquhar, who is always flirting with her own husband across the dinner table. That is not very pleasant. Indeed, it is not even decent. And things like this are quite on the increase today in London. Women are always flirting with their own husbands. It looks perfectly scandalous. It is so bad. It is simply washing one's own clean linen in public. And besides, now that I know you are confirmed Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunbury. I want to tell you all the rules.
Well, I'm not a Bunburyist. Before the week is over, I would have gotten rid of my brother Ernest. In fact, I think I shall get rid of him anyways. Cecily is rather too attached. It's rather a bore. So yes, I will get rid of my brother Ernest, and I suggest you do the same with your friend, Mr. Your invalid friend with that absurd name.
Nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury. And if you ever marry, which seems to me extremely problematic, you'll be very glad to have known Bunbury. Any man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time of it.
If I marry a charming girl like Gwendolen, I certainly will not want to know Bunbury.
Then your wife will. You don't seem to realize that in married life, 3 is company and 2 is none.
Oh, don't try and be cynical. It is so easy to be cynical.
My dear fellow, it's not easy to be anything nowadays. There's such a lot of beastly competition about. That must be Aunt Augusta. Now, if I get you out of the way for 10 minutes so you can have the opportunity of proposing to Gwendolen, may I dine with you tonight at Willis's?
I suppose so, if you want to.
Yes, but you must be serious about it. I hate people who are not serious about meals. Just so shallow of them.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, Algernon. I hope you are behaving well.
I am feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
That's not quite the same thing. In fact, the two things rarely go together.
Dear me, you are smart.
I'm always smart. Aren't I, Mr. Worthing?
You are quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, I hope I'm not that. It would leave no room for developments. And I tend to develop in many directions. I am sorry if we are a little late, Algernon, but I was obliged to call on the dear Lady Harbury. I hadn't been there since her poor husband's death. I'd never seen a woman so altered. She looked quite 20 years younger. And now, I'll have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Gwendolen, won't you come and sit here?
Thank you, Mamma. I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Good heavens! Lane, why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially.
There were no cucumbers in the market this morning, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers.
No, sir, not even for ready money.
That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'm greatly distressed, Aunt Augusta, about there being no cucumber sandwiches. Not even for ready money.
It really makes no matter, Algernon. I had some crumpets with Lady Harbury, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure now.
I hear her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
It certainly has changed color, from what cause I, of course, cannot say. I have quite a treat for you tonight, Algernon. I'm going to send you down with Mary Farquhar. She's such a nice woman and so attentive to her husband. It's delightful to watch them.
I'm afraid, Aunt Augusta, that I will have to give up the pleasure of dining with you tonight after all.
I do hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Your poor uncle would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he is accustomed to that.
It is a great bore, and I need hardly say a terrible disappointment to you. However, the fact is I've just had a telegram telling me that my poor friend Bunbury is very ill again. They seem to think I should be with him.
It seems strange to me that this Mr. Bunbury suffers from such curiously bad health.
Yes, poor Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
I think it's high time Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he was going to live or die. This shilly-shallying with the question is absurd. Nor do I approve of the modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Illness is hardly something to be encouraged in others. Health is the primary duty of life.
That's what I'm always telling your poor uncle, but he never seems to take much notice as far as improvements in his ailments goes. I would be much obliged if you could ask Mr. Bunbury for me not to have a relapse on Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It is my last reception, and one always wants something that will encourage conversation, especially at the end of the season when everyone has said particularly all that they had to say, which in most cases was probably not much.
I will speak to Bunbury Aunt Augusta, if he is still conscious, and I think I can promise you that he will be quite all right by Saturday. However, the music is a great difficulty. You see, if one plays good music, people don't listen, and if one plays bad music, people don't talk. However, I will go over the program I have drawn out, if you will kindly join me in the next room.
Thank you, Algernon. It is very thoughtful of you. I'm sure that the program will be delightful. After a few expurgations. French music I simply cannot allow. People seem to think it is improper, and I either look shocked, which is vulgar, or laugh, which is worse. German sounds a thoroughly respectable language, and indeed, I think so. Gwendolyn, you will accompany me.
Certainly, Mamma.
Charming day, isn't it, Miss Fairfax?
Pray, don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I just feel quite certain they mean something else. And that makes me so nervous.
I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I'm never wrong.
And I would like to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you do so. Mamma has a way of coming back suddenly into a room that I've often had to speak to her about.
Miss Fairfax, I have admired you more than any other girl I've ever met since I met you.
I'm quite aware of that. I often wished in public, at any rate, you had been more demonstrative. For me, you've always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. The fact is constantly mentioned in the more extensive monthly magazines, and it has reached provincial pulpits, I am told. My ideal has always been to love someone of the name of Earnest. There is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. The moment Algernon first mentioned to me he had a friend called Earnest, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really love me, darling.
Passionately.
Oh, you don't know how happy you've made me.
My own Earnest.
Yes, but do you really mean to say you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Ernest?
But your name is Earnest.
Yes, but supposing it wasn't, do you mean to say you couldn't love me then?
Ah, that is a metaphysical speculation. And like most metaphysical speculation, have very little reference to the actual facts of real life, as we know them.
Yes, well, you see, I don't much care for the name of Ernest. I don't think it suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly.
Oh.
It is a divine name. It has music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Yes, but what about Jack? Jack is a charming name.
Jack? No. There is very little music in the name Jack, if any at all, indeed. It does not thrill. It produces absolutely no vibrations. I have known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, are more than usually plain. Besides, Jack is a notorious domesticity for John, and I pity any woman who is married to a man called John. She would probably never be allowed to know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. The only really safe name is Earnest.
Gwendolyn, I must get christened at once. I mean, we must get married at once, darling.
Married? Mr. Worthing?
Well, yes, you know that I love you, and you have led me to believe, Miss Fairfax, that you are not absolutely indifferent towards me.
I adore you. But you haven't proposed to me yet. Nothing's been said at all about marriage. The subject's not even been touched on.
Well, may I propose to you now?
I think it an admirable opportunity, and to spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I think it only fair to tell you quite frankly beforehand that I am fully determined to accept you.
Gwendolyn,
Yes, Mr. Worthing? What have you got to say to me?
you know what I have got to say to you.
Yes, Yes, but you don't say it.
Gwendolyn, will you marry me?
Of course I will, darling. Oh, how long you have been about it. I'm afraid you have very little experience in how to propose. Men often propose for practice. I know my brother Gerald does. All my girlfriends tell me so. What wonderfully blue eyes you have, Ernest. They are quite blue. I hope you will always look at me just like that, especially when there are people present.
Mr. Worthing, rise, sir, from this semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mamma, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing's not quite finished yet.
Finished what, might I ask?
I'm engaged to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Pardon me, you are not engaged. When you do become engaged, I, or your father, permitting his health, will inform you of the fact. An engagement is hardly something that a girl could be trusted to arrange for herself. And now I have a few questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. Gwendolyn, you will wait for me below in the carriage.
Mamma!
Gwendolyn, the carriage. The carriage, Gwendolyn!
Yes, Mamma.
Mr. Worthing, you may take a seat.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell, but I prefer standing.
I feel bound to tell you that you are not down on my list of eligible young men, although I do have the same list as the dear Duchess of Bolton has. We work together, in fact. I must tell you that I am quite ready to put your name down, should your answers be what a really affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes. I must admit I smoke.
I am glad to hear it. I am of the opinion that a man should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. How old are you?
29.
A very good age to be married at. I am of the opinion that a man who desires to be married should know either everything or nothing. What do you know, Mr. Worthing?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I am glad to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with the natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate, exotic fruit. Touch it, and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England, however, education produces no effect whatsoever. If it did, it would probably be dangerous for the upper classes, and it would lead to violence in Grosvenor Square. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In land or investments?
In investments, chiefly.
I am glad to hear it. But between the duties expected of one during one's life and the duties exacted of one after one's death, land has ceased to be either profit or pleasure. It provides one with position and prevents one from keeping it. That is all that can be said about land.
Well, I have a country house with some land attached to it, of course. 1,500 acres, I believe. But I don't depend on it for any of my real income. In fact, as far as I can make out, the poachers are the only ones to make anything out of it.
A country house? How many bedrooms? That can be cleared up afterwards. You do have a townhouse, I hope. A girl with a simple, unspoiled nature such as Gwendolyn could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
I have a house in Belgrave Square, but it is let out by the year to Lady Bloxham. I can get it back, of course, at 6 months' notice.
Lady Bloxham? I don't know her.
Oh, she goes about very little. She's a lady considerably advanced in years.
Ah, nowadays that is hardly an assured basis for respectability of character. What number in Belgrave Square?
149.
Ah, the unfashionable side. I thought there was something. However, that can be easily altered.
Do you mean the fashion or the side?
Both, if necessary, I presume. Now, what are your politics?
Well, I'm afraid I really have none. I am a liberal unionist.
Oh, they dine with us, or come in the evening at any rate. Now, on to minor matters. Are your parents living?
No, I have lost both my parents.
Both? To lose one Mr. Worthing may be regarded as misfortune, but to lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth. Was he born in what the radical papers call the purple of commerce, or did he rise from the ranks of aristocracy?
Yes, well, I'm afraid I don't really know. You see, when I said that I had lost my parents, it would be nearer to the truth to say that they had lost me. You see, I don't know who I am by birth. I was, well, found.
Found?
Yes. The late Mr. Thomas Cardew, a gentleman of a very kind and charitable disposition, found me and gave me the name of Worthing because at the time he had a first-class ticket to Worthing in his pocket. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It is a seaside resort.
And where did this charitable gentleman with the first-class ticket to the seaside resort find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, a handbag. A large black leather handbag with handles on it. An ordinary handbag, in fact.
In what locality did this Mr. James or Thomas Cardew find this ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station. It was given to him in mistake for his own.
The cloakroom at Victoria Station?
Yes, the Brighton line.
The line is immaterial, Mr. Worthing. I must confess that I am somewhat bewildered by what I have just heard. To be born, or at any rate, bred in a handbag, whether it had handles or not, seems to me to show a certain contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life, and reminds one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution, and I trust you know what that unfortunate movement led to. As to the particular locality of the handbag, a cloakroom at a railway station could serve to conceal a social indiscretion, and probably has been used for that purpose before now, though it could hardly be an assured basis for a position in good society.
Well, what would you advise me to do? I need hardly to say that I would do anything to ensure Gwendolyn's happiness.
I would advise you to acquire a relation as soon as possible and make a definite effort to produce at least one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
Well, I don't know how I could possibly manage that. I can produce the handbag at any rate. It is in my dressing room at home. I really think that should satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What is it to do with me? You can hardly imagine that I and Lord Bracknell would allow our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and to form an alliance with a parcel. Good morning, Mr. Worthing.
Good morning. For heaven's sakes, don't play that ghastly tune, Algy. How idiotic of you!
Didn't it go off all right, old boy? You don't mean to say Gwendolyn refused you? I know it is a way she has. She is always refusing people. I think it is most ill-natured of her.
Though Gwendolyn is as right as a trivet. As far as she is concerned, we are engaged. Her mother, on the other hand, is quite unbearable. I've never met such a gorgon. Well, I don't really know what a gorgon is, but I'm sure that she is one. She is a monster without being a myth, which is rather unfair. I beg your pardon, Algy. I suppose I shouldn't talk about your own relations like this in front of you.
My dear boy, I love hearing my relations abused. It is the only thing that makes me put up with them at all. Relations are simply a tedious pack of people who haven't got the smallest knowledge of how to live, nor the smallest instinct about when to die.
Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't?
Well, I won't argue about the matter. You always want to argue about things.
That is exactly what things were originally made for.
Oh, if I thought that, I'd up and shoot myself. Well, you don't think there is any chance of Gwendolyn becoming like her mother in about 150 years, do you, Algie?
All women become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man does. That's his.
Is that clever?
It's perfectly phrased, and quite as true as any observation in civilized life should be.
Well, I'm sick to death of cleverness. Everyone is clever nowadays. You can't go anywhere without meeting a clever person. It has become a public nuisance. I wish to goodness there were some fools left.
There are.
Really? I should extremely like to meet them. What do they talk about?
The fools? Oh, about the clever people, of course.
What fools?
By the way, have you told Gwendolyn the truth about your being Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
Oh, that isn't the sort of thing one tells a sweet, nice, refined girl like Gwendolyn. What mysterious ways you have of behaving towards women.
The only way to behave to a woman is to make love to her if she is pretty, and to someone else if she is plain.
That is nonsense.
And what about your brother? What about the profligate Earnest?
Well, before the week is over, I would have gotten rid of Ernest. I'll say he died in Paris of apoplexy. Lots of people die of apoplexy, don't they? Quite suddenly.
Yes, but it's hereditary, my dear fellow.
Who?
You had much better say he died of a severe chill.
Are you sure a severe chill is not hereditary or anything of that kind?
Of course it isn't.
Very well then. Ernest is suddenly carried off in Paris by a severe chill. That gets rid of him.
But didn't you say Cecily was a little too fond of your brother? Won't she feel his loss a great deal?
Well, Cecily is not a silly romantic girl, I'm glad to say. She goes on long walks, has a capital appetite, and doesn't pay any attention at all to her studies.
I'd quite like to see Cecily.
I will make sure you never do. She is excessively pretty and has only just turned 18.
And have you told Gwendolyn yet that you have an excessively pretty ward who's only 18?
Oh, that isn't the sort of thing one blurts out to people. I'm sure they will be best of friends. I'll bet you anything within a half an hour they will be calling each other sister.
Women only call each other that when they have called each other in lots of other things first. Now, if we want to get to a good table at Willis's, we really must go and dress. It is nearly 7.
Oh, it is always nearly 7.
Well, I'm hungry.
I never knew you when you weren't.
And what shall we do after dinner? Shall we go to the theatre?
Oh no, I loathe listening.
Well, then let us go to the club.
Ugh, I hate talking.
Then shall we trot round to the Empire around 10?
I can't bear looking at things. It is so silly.
Then what shall we do?
Nothing.
It is awfully hard work doing nothing. There is no objection, I admit, to doing work when there is no definite object of any kind.
Miss Fairfax.
Gwendolyn, upon my word!
Algie, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
Really, Gwendolyn, I don't think I can allow this at all.
Algie, you always adopt a strictly immoral attitude towards life. You're not quite old enough to do that. Ernest, we may never be married. From the look of Mamma's face, I fear we never shall. Few parents nowadays pay any regard to what their children say to them. The old-fashioned respect for the young is fast dying out. Whatever influence I had from Mamma, I lost at age 3. But although she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else, and marry often, nothing that she can possibly do can alter my eternal devotion to you.
Oh, my dear Gwendolyn.
The story of your romantic origin, as related to me by Mamma, with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibers of my nature. Your Christian name has an irresistible fascination. The simplicity of your character, exquisitely incomprehensible to me. Your town address of the Albany I have. What is your address in the country?
The Manor House, Wilton, Hertfordshire.
There is a good postal service, I suppose. It may be necessary to do something desperate. That, of course, will require serious consideration. I will communicate with you daily.
Oh, my own one.
How long do you remain in town?
Till Monday.
Good. Algie, you may turn around now.
Thanks, I've turned round already.
You may also ring the bell.
You will let me escort you to your carriage?
Certainly.
I will see Miss Fairfax out.
Yes, sir.
A glass of sherry, Lane.
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow, Lane, I'm going bumbering.
Yes, sir.
I shall probably not be back till Monday. You could put my dress clothes, my smoking jacket, and all the bunbury.
Yes, sir.
Hope tomorrow will be a fine day, Lane.
It never is, sir.
Lane, you are a perfect pessimist.
I do my best to give satisfaction, sir.
There is a sensible, intellectual girl. The only girl I have ever cared for in my entire life. What on earth are you so amused about?
Oh, just a little anxious about poor Bunbury, that is all.
If you don't take care, your poor friend Mr. Bunbury will get you into a serious scrape one day.
I love scrapes. They are the only things that are never serious.
Well, that is nonsense. You never talk anything but nonsense.
Nobody ever does.
Cecily! Cecily! Surely such utilitarian occupation such as watering the flowers is rather Moulton's duty than yours. Especially at a moment when intellectual pleasures await you. Your German grammar is on the table. Pray to open at page 15 and repeat yesterday's lesson.
But I don't like German. It isn't at all a becoming language. I know perfectly well that I look quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know how anxious your guardian is, that you should improve on yourself in every way. He laid particular stress on your German when he was leaving for town yesterday. Indeed, he always lays stress on your German when he's leaving for town.
Dear Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes he's so serious that I think he cannot be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health, and his gravity of demeanor is especially to be commended on in one so comparatively young as he is. I know no one with the highest sense of duty or responsibility.
I suppose that is why he often looks a little bored whenever we three are together.
Cecily, I'm surprised at you. Your guardian has many troubles in his life. Idle merriment and triviality would be out of place in his conversation. You must remember his constant anxieties about that unfortunate young man, his brother.
I wish Uncle Jack would allow that unfortunate young man, his brother, to come down here sometimes. We might have a good influence over him this prison. I'm sure you certainly would. You know German and geology and things of that kind influence a man very much.
Indeed, I do not think that even I could produce such an effect on a character that, according to his own brother's admission, is irretrievably weak and vacillating. Indeed, I do not think that I would desire to reclaim him. I'm not in favor of this modern mania of turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. As a man sows, so shall he reap. You must put away your diary, Cecily. I really do not see why you should keep a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order to enter the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't write them down, I should probably forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is the diary we all carry with us.
I suppose so. I believe that memory is responsible for nearly all 3-volume novels that Moody sends us.
Do not speak slightingly of the 3-volume novel, Cecily. I wrote one myself in earlier days.
Did you really, Miss Prison? How wonderfully clever you are. I hope it did not end happily. I don't like novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
The good ended happily and the bad ended unhappily. That is what fiction means.
I suppose so, but it seems very unfair. And was your novel ever published?
Alas, was abandoned. I use the word in a sense of lost or mislaid. To your work, child. These speculations are profitless.
But I see dear Dr. Chasuble coming up through the garden.
Dr. Chasuble, it is indeed a pleasure.
And how are we this afternoon? Miss Prism, I trust you are well.
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. I think it would do her so much good to have a short stroll with you in the park, Dr. Chasuble.
Cecily, I have not mentioned anything about a headache.
No, I know that, Miss Prism. But I felt instinctively that you had a headache. Indeed, I was thinking about that, and not about my German lesson when the rector came in.
Dear Cecily, I hope you are not inattentive.
Oh, I'm afraid I am.
That is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I speak metaphorically. My metaphor was drawn from the bees. I suppose Mr. Worthing hasn't returned from town yet?
We do not expect him till Monday afternoon.
Ah, yes. He usually likes to spend his Sunday afternoons in London. He is not one whose sole aim is enjoyment, as by all accounts that unfortunate young man, his brother, is. But I must not disturb Egeria and her young pupil any longer.
Egeria? My name is Letitia, Doctor.
Classical illusion merely, from the pagan office. I shall see you both, no doubt, at evensong.
I think, dear Doctor, I will have a stroll with you. I find I have a headache after all, and a walk might do it good.
We may go as far as to the schools and back.
That would be delightful. Cecily, you'll read your political economy in my absence. Chapter on the fall of the rupee you may omit. It is somewhat too sensational. Even these metallic problems have their melodramatic side.
Reading political economy. It is wonderful how young girls are educated nowadays. I am sure you know all about the relations between capital and labor.
Oh, I'm afraid I'm not learned at all. All I know is about the relations between capital and idleness, and that is merely from observation, so I don't suppose it is true.
Cecily, that sounds like socialism. And I suppose you know what socialism leads to.
Oh, yes, that leads to rational dress, Miss Prism. And I suppose that when one is dressed rationally, she is treated rationally. She certainly deserves to be.
Wilful lamb, dear child.
A sad trouble sometimes.
I envy you. Such tribulation.
Horrid political economy. Horrid geography. Horrid German. Mr. Ernest Worthing has just driven over from the station. He's brought his luggage with him. Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4, the Albany W. Uncle Jack's brother. Did you tell him Mr. Worthing was in town?
Yes, miss. He seemed very much disappointed. I mentioned that you, Miss Prism, in the garden. He said he was very anxious to speak to you privately for a moment.
Pray ask him to come here. I suppose you'd better talk to the housekeeper about a room for him.
Yes,
Yes, miss. I've never met any really wicked person before. I feel rather frightened. So afraid he will look just like everyone else. He does.
You are my little cousin Cecily, I'm sure.
I'm afraid you are under some strange mistake. I'm not little. In fact, I believe I'm more than usually tall for my age. You, I see from your card, are Uncle Jack's brother. My cousin Earnest, my wicked cousin Earnest.
Oh, I'm not really wicked at all, cousin Cecily. You mustn't think that I'm wicked.
If you are not, then you have certainly been deceiving us all in a very inexcusable manner. I hope you are not leading a double life, pretending to be wicked and being really good all the time. That would be hypocrisy.
Well, I have been rather reckless.
I'm glad to hear it.
In fact, now you mention the subject, I have been very bad in my own small way.
I don't think you should be so proud of that, but I'm sure it must have been very pleasant.
It is much pleasanter being here with you.
I can't understand how you're here at all. Uncle won't be back till Monday afternoon.
That is a great disappointment. I'm obliged to go up by the first train on Monday morning. I have a very important business meeting that I'm anxious to miss.
Couldn't you miss it anywhere but in London?
No, the appointment is in London.
Oh. Well, I've course, know how important it is not to keep a business engagement if one wants to retain any sense of beauty in life. But I still think you had better wait till Uncle Jack arrives. I know he wants to talk to you about your emigrating.
About my what?
About your emigrating. He's gone up to buy your outfit.
I certainly wouldn't let Jack buy my outfit. He has no taste in neckties at all.
I don't think you shall require neckties. Uncle is sending you to Australia.
Australia? I'd sooner die.
Well, he said at dinner on Wednesday night that you would have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Well, the accounts I have received of Australia and the next world are not particularly encouraging. This world is good enough for me, Cousin Cecily.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
I'm afraid I'm not that. That is why I want you to reform me. You might make that your mission, if you don't mind, Cousin Cecily.
I'm afraid I have no time this afternoon.
Well, would you mind my reforming myself this afternoon?
It is rather chaotic of you, but I still think you should try.
I will. I feel better already.
You are looking a little worse.
Not just because I'm hungry.
Oh. How thoughtless of me. I should remember that when one is going to lead an entirely new life, one is required regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
Thank you. Might I have a buttonhole first? I never have any appetite unless I have a buttonhole first.
A Marechal meal.
No, I'd sooner have a pink rose.
Why?
Because you are like a pink rose, Cousin Cecily.
I don't think it can be right for you to talk to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
Then Miss Prism is a short-sighted old lady. You are the prettiest girl I ever saw.
Miss Prism says that all good looks are a snare.
There are a snare that every sensible man would like to be caught in.
Don't think I should like to catch a sensible man. I should know what to talk to him about.
You are too much alone, Dr. Chasuble. You should get married. A misanthrope, I can understand. A womanthrope, never.
Believe me, I do not deserve so neologistic a phrase. The precept as well as the practice of the primitive church was distinctly against matrimony.
That is obviously the reason why the primitive church has not lasted up to the present day. And you do not seem to realize, dear doctor, that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation. Men should be more careful. This very celibacy leads weaker vessels astray.
Yes, but is a man not equally attractive when married?
No married man is ever attractive, except to his wife.
Often I've heard, not even to her.
That depends on the intellectual sympathies of the woman. Maturity can always be depended on. Ripeness can be trusted. Young women are green. I spoke horticulturally. My metaphor was drawn from fruits. But where is Cecily?
Yeah, perhaps she followed us back from the schools.
Mr. Worthing,
Mr. Worthing?
this is indeed a surprise. We did not look for you till Monday afternoon.
Yes, I have returned sooner than I expected. Dr. Chasuble, I hope you are well.
Dear Mr. Worthing, I trust that this garb of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother.
More shameful debts and extravagance.
Still leading his life of pleasure?
Dead.
Your brother, Earnest, dead!
Quite dead.
What a lesson for him. I trust he will profit by it.
Dear Mr. Worthing, I offer you my sincere condolence. You have at least the consolation of knowing you are always the most generous and forgiving of brothers.
Poor Ernest. You had many faults, but it is a sad, sad blow.
Very sad indeed.
Oh, yes.
Were you with him there at the end?
No, he died abroad, in Paris, in fact. I had a telegram last night from the manager of the Grand Hotel.
There's a cause of death mentioned.
Severe chill, it seems.
As a man sows, so shall he reap.
Oh, charity, dear Prism, charity. None of us are perfect. Even I am peculiarly susceptible to drafts. Will the interment take place here?
No, he seemed to express a desire to be buried in Paris.
In Paris?
Yes.
I fear that hardly points to any serious state of mind at the last. You would no doubt want me to make some slight allusion to the domestic affliction next Sunday. My sermon on the meaning of the man in the wilderness can be adapted to most any occasion. Joyous, or in the present case, distressing. I have preached it at harvest celebrations, christenings, confirmations, days of humiliation, and festal days.
Ah, that reminds me. You mentioned christenings? Didn't you, Dr. Chasuble? I mean, you do know how to christen, all right. You are constantly christening, aren't you?
It is, I regret to say, one of the rector's most constant duties in this parish. I've often spoken to the poorer classes on the subject, but they don't seem to know what thrift is.
Yes, Mr. Willing, but is there any particular infant in whom you have in mind? Your brother Earnest was unmarried, I believe, was he not?
Ah, yes.
People who live entirely for pleasure usually are.
It is not for any child, though I am particularly fond of children. No. The fact is, I would like to be christened myself this afternoon, if you have nothing better to do.
Well, surely, Mr. Worthing, you've been christened already.
I don't remember anything about it.
Do you have any grave doubts about the matter?
I certainly intend to have. I mean, if the service would bother you, or you think I am a little too old now, then...
Not at all. Sprinkling and indeed the immersion of adults in holy water was a perfectly common practice of the primitive church.
Immersion?
You need have no apprehensions. Sprinkling is all that's necessary. Indeed, I think advisable. Our weather is so changeable. At what hour do you wish the ceremony be performed?
Oh, I think I might trot around about 5, if that should suit you.
Oh, perfectly, perfectly. In fact, I have 2 similar cases to perform at that time. A case of twins on one of the cottages of your outlying estate.
Yes.
Poor Jenkins the carter. Most hard-working man.
Yes. Well, I don't see much fun in being christened alongside of the babies. It would be childish. Would 5:30 do?
Oh, admirably, admirably. Yes. And now, Mr. Worthing, I will intrude no longer into this house of sorrow.
Oh, yes.
I would merely ask you not to be too bowed down by grief. What seem bitter trials to us are oftentimes blessings in disguise.
Yes.
This seems to me a blessing of an extremely obvious kind.
Uncle Jack! Oh, I'm pleased to see you back. But what horrid clothes you've got on. Do go and change them.
Cecily, dear child!
What is the matter, Uncle Jack? Do look happy. You look as if you had had a toothache. And I've got such a surprise for you. Who do you think is in the dining room? Your brother.
Who?
Your brother Earnest. He arrived about half an hour ago.
That is nonsense. I haven't got a brother.
Oh, don't say that. However badly he may have behaved to you in the past, he is still your brother. You couldn't be so heartless as to disown him. I'll tell him to come out. And you will shake hands with him, won't you, Uncle Jack?
My brother? In the dining room?
These are indeed joyful tidings!
Although we had all been resigned to his loss, his sudden return seems to me peculiarly distressing.
I don't know what it all means. It is perfectly absurd.
Brother John, I have come down from town to tell you that I am very sorry for all the trouble I have given you, and that I intend to lead a better life in the future.
There is good in that young man. He seems sincerely repentant.
These sudden conversions do not please me.
Uncle Jack, you aren't going to refuse your own brother's hand.
Nothing will induce me to take this man's hand. I think his coming down here disgraceful. He knows why.
Do be nice, Uncle Jack. There's some good in everyone. Ernest has just been telling me about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, who he got to visit so often. And surely there is much good in a man who is kind to an invalid.
Oh, he has been talking about Bunbury, has he?
Yes, he has told me all about Mr. Bunbury and his terrible state of
Well,
health.
I won't have him talk to you about Bunbury or anything else. It's enough to drive anyone perfectly frantic.
Mr. Worthing, your brother has been restored to you by the mysterious dispensations of circumstance, who seems to desire your reconciliation. And indeed, is it not good for brothers to dwell together in amity?
Though I must admit that the faults were all on my side. But I must say that I think that Brother John's coldness to me is peculiarly painful. I expected a more enthusiastic welcome, especially considering it is the first time I have come here.
Uncle Jack, if you you don't shake hands with Ernest, I will never forgive you.
Never forgive me.
Never, never, never.
Well, this is the last time I shall ever do it.
It is wonderful, is it not, to see so perfect a reconciliation? I think we might just leave the two brothers together.
Cecily, you will come with us.
Certainly. My little task of reconciliation is over.
You have done a wonderful action today, dear child.
Let us not be premature in our judgments.
I feel very happy.
Algie, you young scoundrel! You have to leave as soon as possible. I do not allow any bunburying here.
I've put Mr. Ernest's things in the room next to your own, sir. I suppose that is all right.
What?
Mr. Ernest's luggage. I've unpacked it in the room next to your own, sir.
His luggage?
Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, a dressing case, 2 hat boxes, and a large luncheon basket.
I am afraid I can't stay more than a week this time.
Mary, order the dog cart at once. Mr. Earnest has suddenly been called back to town.
Yes, sir.
What a fearful liar you are, Jack. I have not been called back to town at all.
Yes, you have.
I haven't heard anyone call me.
Your duty as a gentleman calls you back.
My duty as a gentleman has never interfered with my pleasures in the smallest degree.
You quite understand that.
Well, Cecily is a darling.
I will not have you talk about Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. You look perfectly ridiculous. Now, why on earth don't you go up and change? It is perfectly childish to be in deep mourning for a man who is actually staying with you in your house for a whole week as a guest. I call it grotesque.
You are not staying in my house with me for a whole week as a guest or anything else. You have to leave by the 4:05 train.
Oh, I certainly won't be leaving you so long as you are in mourning. It would be most unfriendly. If I were in mourning, you would stay with me, I suppose. I would think it very unkind if you didn't.
Well, will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, if you are not too long. I never saw anybody take so long to dress with such little result.
Well, at any rate, it is better than always being overdressed as you are.
If I am occasionally a little overdressed, I make up for it by being always immensely overeducated.
Your vanity is ridiculous. Your conduct is an outrage, and your presence in my garden is utterly absurd. However, you've got to catch the 4:05 train, and I do hope you have a pleasant trip back to town. It seems this bunburying, as you call it, has not been a great success for you.
I think it has been a great success. I am in love with Cecily. That is everything. Though I must see her one last time before I go. I'm making arrangements for another bunbury. There she is.
Cecily! Cecily! You are again making entries in your diary. I think I have had occasion more than once to speak to you about that morbid habit of yours.
I am merely, as I always do, taking you for my example, Miss Prison.
When one has thoroughly mastered the principles of bimetallism, one has the right to lead an introspective life. I must beg you to return to your political economy.
In one moment, Miss Prison. The fact is, I have only chronicled the events for today up until 2:15, and it was at 2:30 that the fearful catastrophe occurred.
Pardon me, Cecily. It was at exactly 2:45 when Dr. Choswell mentioned the extremely painful views held by the primitive church on marriage.
I was not referring to Dr. Choswell at all. I was alluding to the tragic exposure of Mr. Ernest Worthing.
I do not approve of that Mr. Ernest Worthing. He is a thoroughly bad young man.
I fear he must be. It's the only explanation I can find for his strange attractiveness.
Mr. Worthing, I thought, may I say, I was in hopes that you had already returned to town.
I have come back to bid you goodbye, Miss Cardew, and to mention to you, Miss Prison, that Dr. Choswell is waiting for you in the vestry.
In the vestry? That sounds serious. I do not think it would be right to keep him waiting.
I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
He's gone to order the dog cart for me.
Oh, is he going to take you for a nice drive?
He's going to send me away.
Then have we got to part?
I'm afraid so. It is a very painful parting.
'Tis always painful to part from those whom we've only known a very brief space of time. The absence of old friends one can endure with equanimity. But even a momentary separation from anyone to one has just been introduced is almost unbearable.
Thank you.
The dog cart's at the door, sir.
It can wait, Emma, for 5 minutes.
Yes, miss.
I hope I shall not offend you, Cecily, if I state quite frankly and openly that you seem to me to be in every way the visible personification of absolute perfection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Dennis. If you will allow me, I will copy your remarks into my diary.
Do you really keep a diary? I'd give anything to look at it. May I?
Oh, no! Well, you see, it is simply a very young girl's record of her own thoughts and impressions, and consequently meant for publication. When it appears in volume form, I hope you will order a copy. But pray, Earnest, don't stop. I delight in taking down your dictation. You have reached absolute perfection. You can go on. I am quite ready for more. Oh, don't cough, Earnest. When one is dictating, one should speak fluently and not cough. Besides, I don't know how to spell cough.
Cecily, ever since I have first laid eyes on your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I have dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
I don't think you should tell me you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't seem to make much sense, now does it?
Cecily,
The dog cart is at the door, sir.
tell her to come round next week at the same hour.
Yes, sir.
Uncle Jack would be very annoyed if he knew you were staying on until next week at the same hour.
Well, I don't care about Jack. I don't care for anybody in the whole world but you. I love you, Cecily. You will marry me, won't you?
Oh, silly boy, of course. We have been engaged for 3 months.
For 3 months.
Yes, it will be exactly 3 months on Thursday.
But how did we become engaged?
Well, ever since dear Uncle Jack first confessed to us that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, you, of course, held the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And, of course, a man who is much talked about is always very attractive. One seems to find there's something in him after all. I dare say it was foolish of me, but I fell in love with you, Earnest.
Darling. And when was the engagement actually settled?
On the 14th of February last, worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence. I determined to end the matter one way or another, and after a long struggle with myself, I accepted you under this dear old tree here. The next day I bought this ring in your name, and here is the bracelet with the true lover's knot I promised to always wear.
Did I give you this? It's very pretty, isn't it?
Yes, you've wonderfully good taste, Earnest. It's the excuse I've always used for your leading such a bad life. And here is the box in which I keep all your dear letters.
My letters? But my own sweet Cecily, I've never written you any letters.
You need hardly remind me of that, Earnest. I remember only too well that I was forced to write your letters for you. I wrote 3 times a week, and sometimes oftener.
Do let me read them, Cecily.
Oh, no. That would make you far too conceited.
What a perfect angel you are.
Dear romantic boy, I hope your hair curls naturally. Does it?
Yes, darling. With a little help from others.
I'm so glad.
You'll never break off our engagement, Cecily.
I don't think I could now that we've actually met. Of course, there's still the question of your name.
Yes, of course.
You mustn't laugh at me, darling. It has always been a girlish dream of mine to love someone by the name of Earnest. There's something in that name that seems to inspire absolute confidence. I pity any poor married woman whose husband isn't named Earnest.
Do you mean to say you could not love me if I had some other name?
But what name?
Any name you like. Algernon, for instance.
But I don't like the name of Algernon.
Well, my own sweet, loving little darling, I really can't see why you'd object to the name of Algernon. It is not at all a bad name. In fact, it's rather an aristocratic name. Half the chaps that get into the bankruptcy court are called Algernon. But seriously, Cecily, if my name is Algernon, couldn't you love me?
I might respect you. I might admire your character, but I fear I wouldn't be able to give you my undivided attention.
Cecily, your rector here is, I suppose, thoroughly experienced in all the rites and ceremonials of the church?
Oh, Dr. Chasuble is a most learned man. He has never written a single book, so you can imagine how much he knows.
I must see him at once on a most important business. I mean, a most important business.
Oh!
I shan't be away more than half an hour.
Considering that we've been engaged since February the 14th,
and that I've now just met you for the first time. I think it is rather hard that you leave me for such a long period as half an hour. Couldn't you make it 20 minutes?
I'll be back in no time.
Impetuous boy he is. I like his hair so much. I must enter his proposal into my diary. Miss Fairfax has called to see Mr. Worthing on very important business, Miss Fairfax states. Isn't Mr. Worthing in his library? Mr. Worthing went in the direction of the rectory some time ago. Pray ask the lady to come here. Mr. Worthing is sure to be back soon. And you can bring tea. Yes, miss. Miss Fairfax. I suppose one of the many good elderly women who are associated with Uncle Jack in some philanthropic work in London. I don't like women who are interested in philanthropic work. I think it is so forward of them. Miss Fairfax. Pray let me introduce myself to you. My name is Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew. What a very sweet name. Something tells me that we are going to be great friends. I like you already more than I can say. My first impressions of people are never wrong.
How nice of you to like me so much after we've only known each other such a comparatively short time. Pray sit down.
I may call you Cecily, may I not?
With pleasure.
And you are always calling Gwendolyn, won't you?
If you wish.
Then that is all quite settled, is it not?
I hope so.
Perhaps this might be a favourable opportunity for my mentioning who I am. My father's Lord Ragnar. You have a papa, I suppose.
I don't think so.
Outside the family circle, papa, I am glad to say, is entirely unknown. I think that is quite as it should be. The home seems to me to be the proper sphere for the man. And certainly once a man begins to neglect his domestic duties, he becomes painfully effeminate. Does he not? And I don't like that. It makes men so very attractive. Cecily, Mamma, his views on education are remarkably strict. Has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted. It is part of her system. Do you mind my looking at you through my glasses?
Oh, not at all, Gwendolyn. I'm very fond of being looked at.
You are here on a short visit, I suppose.
Oh, no, I live here.
Really? Your mother, no doubt. Or some female relative of advanced years resides here also?
No, I have no mother, nor in fact any relations.
Indeed.
My guardian, with the assistance of Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
Yes, I am Mr. Worthing's ward.
Oh, that is strange. He never mentioned to me he had a ward. How secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. I'm not sure, however, that the news inspires me with feelings of unmixed delight. I'm very fond of you, Cecily. I've liked you since I met you. But I am bound to state that now that I know you're Mr. Worthing's ward, I cannot help expressing wish you were, well, just a little bit older than you seem to be, and not quite so very alluring in appearance. In fact, if I may speak candidly,
Oh, pray do. I think that whenever anyone has anything unpleasant to say, one should always speak quite candid.
well, to speak with perfect candor, Cecily, I wish you a full 42 and more than usually plain for your age. Ernest has a strong, upright nature. He is the very soul of truth and honor. Disloyalty to him would be as impossible as deception. But even men of the noblest possible moral character are extremely susceptible to the influence of the physical charms of others. Modern, no less, than ancient history supplies us with many most painful examples of what I refer to. If it were not so, indeed, history would be quite unreadable.
I beg your pardon, Gwendolyn. Did you say Ernest?
Yes.
But it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is my guardian. It is his brother, his elder brother.
Ernest never mentioned to me he had a brother.
I'm sorry to say they have not been on good terms for a long time.
Ah, that accounts for it. And now that I think of it, I've never heard any man mention his brother. The subject seems distasteful to most men. Cecily, you've lifted a load from my mind. I was growing almost anxious. It would have been terrible if any cloud come across friendship like ours. Would it not? Of course, you're quite sure it's not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is your guardian?
Quite sure. In fact, I'm going to be his.
I beg your pardon.
Dearest Gwendolyn, there's no reason why I should make a secret of it to you. Our little county newspaper sure to chronicle the fact next week. Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
My darling Cecily, I'm afraid there must be some slight error. Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to me. The announcement appeared the Morning Post at Saturday at the latest.
I'm afraid you are under some strange misconception. Ernest proposed to me exactly 10 minutes ago.
It is certainly very curious, for he asked me his wife yesterday afternoon at 5:30. If you would care to verify the incident, pray do so. I never travel without my diary. One must always have something sensational to read on the train. I'm so sorry, dear Cecily, if it is any disappointment to you, but I'm afraid that I have the prior claim.
It would distress me more than I can tell you, dear Gwendolyn, if it caused you any mental or physical anguish. But I feel bound to point out that ever since Ernest proposed to you, he clearly has changed his mind.
If the poor fellow has been entrapped into any foolish promise, I shall consider my duty to rescue him at once, and with a firm hand.
Whatever unfortunate entanglements my dear boy may have gotten into, I will never reproach him with it after we are married.
Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You are presumptuous. On an occasion of this kind, it becomes more than moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into an engagement? How dare you? This is no time to wear the shallow mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
I'm glad to say that I've never seen a spade. It is obvious that our social spheres have been widely different.
Shall I lay tea here as usual, miss? Yes, as usual.
Are there many interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cardew?
Yes, a great many. From the top of one of the hills quite close, one can see 5 counties.
5 counties? I don't think I should like that. I hate crowds.
I suppose that is why you live in town.
What a well-kept garden this is, Miss Cardew.
So glad you like it, Miss Fairfax.
I had no idea there were any flowers in the country.
Yes, flowers are as common here as people are in London.
Personally, I cannot understand how anybody manages to exist in the country. If anybody who is anybody does. The country always bores me to death.
This is what the newspapers call agricultural depression, is it not? I believe the aristocracy are suffering from it here just at present. It is almost an epidemic amongst them, I've been told. May I offer you some tea, Miss Fairfax?
Thank you. Detestable gore, but I require tea.
Sugar?
No, thank you. Sugar's not fashionable anymore.
Cake or bread and butter?
Bread and butter. Cake is rarely seen at the best houses nowadays.
On that to Miss Fairfax.
You have filled my tea with lumps of sugar, and even though I asked most distinctly for bread and butter, you have given me cake. I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the extraordinary sweetness of my nature, but I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
To save my poor, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of any other girl, there are no lengths to which I would not go.
From the moment I first saw you, I distrusted you. I felt you were false and deceitful. I am never deceived in such matters. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
It seems to me, Miss Fairfax, that I am trespassing on your valuable time. No doubt you have many other calls of a similar character to make in the neighborhood.
My dear Gwendolyn.
Ernest, my own Ernest. A moment. Are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
Oh, to dear little Cecily. Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I knew there must be some misconception. The gentleman whose arm is at present around your waist is my dear guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon.
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack!
Oh, he is Ernest.
My own love.
In one moment, Ernest, may I ask you, are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
To what young lady? Gwendolyn.
Yes, Gwendolyn.
Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I felt there must be some slight error, Miss Cardew. But the gentleman who is now embracing you is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief.
Algernon Moncrief? Oh, are you called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Is your name really John?
I could deny it. I could deny anything if I'd like, but my name most certainly is John. It has been John for years.
Gross deception has been practiced on the both of us.
My poor wounded Cecily!
My sweet wronged Gwendolyn!
Call me sister, will you not?
There's just one question I would like to be allowed to ask my dear guardian.
An admirable idea. Mr. Worthing, there is just one question I'd like to be permitted to put to you. Where is your brother Ernest? We are both engaged to be married to your brother Ernest, so it's a matter of some importance to know where he is at present.
Gwendolyn. Cecily. It is very painful for me to have to speak the truth. It is the first time I have ever been reduced to such a painful position, and I am quite inexperienced in doing anything of the kind. However, I will tell you quite frankly that I have no brother named Ernest. I never had a brother, and I don't have the smallest intention of ever having a brother.
No brother at all?
None.
Had you never a brother of any kind?
Never. Not of any kind.
I think it is quite clear, Cecily, that neither of us are engaged to be married to anyone.
Certainly isn't a pleasant position for a girl to suddenly find herself in, is it?
Let us go into the house. They will hardly venture to come after us there.
Yes, men are so cowardly, aren't they?
This ghastly state of things what you call buntering, I suppose.
Yes, and a perfectly wonderful Bunbury it is. The most wonderful Bunbury I've ever had in my life.
Well, you have no right whatsoever to Bunbury here.
That is absurd. One has a right to Bunbury anywhere one chooses. Every serious Bunbury is not that.
Serious Bunburys? Good heavens!
Well, one must be serious about something if one wants to have any amusement in life. I happen to be serious about Bunbury. What on earth you are serious about, I haven't got the remotest idea. About everything, I should fancy. You have such an absolutely trivial nature.
The only small satisfaction I get out of this whole wretched business is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. You won't be able to come down quite as often to the country. And a good thing, too.
Your brother is a little off colour, isn't he, dear Jack? You won't be able to disappear into London quite so frequently as your wicked custom was. And not a bad thing either.
And as for your conduct towards Miss Cardew, I say that you're taking in a sweet, innocent girl like that quite inexcusable. To say nothing of the fact that she is my ward.
Well, I can see no possible defence at all for your deceiving a brilliant, clever, thoroughly experienced young lady like Miss Fairfax. To say nothing of the fact that she is my cousin.
I merely wanted to be engaged to Gwendolyn. I love her.
Well, I simply wanted to be engaged to Cecily. I adore her.
Well, there's certainly no chance of your marrying Miss Cardew.
Well, I don't think there is much likelihood, Jack, of you and Miss Fairfax being united.
Well, that is no business of yours.
If it was my business, I wouldn't talk about it. It is very vulgar to talk about one's own business. Only people like stockbrokers do that. And then merely at dinner parties.
How can you sit there calmly eating muffins while we are in this terrible trouble I can't make out? It seems to me that you are perfectly heartless.
Well, I can't eat muffins in an agitated manner. The butter would probably get on my cups. When one is eating muffins, one should always eat them quite calmly. It is the only way to eat them.
I say it is quite harmless of you eating muffins at all under the circumstances.
When I am in trouble, eating is the only thing that consoles me. And indeed, when I am in great trouble, as anyone who is intimately with me will tell you, the only thing I do not refuse is food and drink. I'm eating muffins at the moment because I'm unhappy. Besides, I'm particularly fond of muffins.
Well, that doesn't mean you should eat them in that greedy way.
Please have some tea cake. I don't like tea cake.
Or suppose a man may be able to have his own muffins in his own garden.
But you have just said it's perfectly harmless to be eating muffins.
I said it was perfectly harmless of you under the circumstances. That is a quite different thing.
That may be true, but the muffins are the same.
Oh, Algie, why won't you go?
I certainly won't go so long as I haven't eaten dinner. No one ever goes without having eaten dinner first, except for vegetarians and people like that. Joe, you're at the muffins again. I wish you wouldn't.
But I hate tea cake.
Then why on earth do you have it served up to your guests? What ideas do you have of hospitality?
Algie, I said I don't want you here. Why won't you go?
Well, I haven't quite finished my tea yet. And there are still plenty of muffins left. Have an opportunity of meeting you.
Well, that certainly seems a satisfactory explanation, does it not?
Yes, dear. If you can believe him.
I don't. That does not affect the beauty of his answer.
True. In matters of great importance, style, not sincerity, is a vital thing. Mr. Worthing, what explanation can you offer to me for pretending to have a brother? Was it in order that you might have an opportunity to come up to town as often as possible to see me?
Can you doubt us, Miss Fairfax?
I have the greatest doubts upon the subject, but I intend to crush them. This is not a moment for German skepticism. The explanations appear to be quite satisfactory. Especially Mr. Worthing's. That seems to me to have the stamp of truth upon it.
I am more than content with what Mr. Moncrief said. His voice alone inspires one with absolute credulity.
Then you think we should forgive them?
Yes. I mean, no.
True, I had forgotten. There are principles at stake that one cannot surrender. Which of us should tell them? The task is not a pleasant one.
Could we not both speak at the same time?
An excellent idea. I nearly always speak at the same time as other people. Will you keep the time for me?
Certainly. Your Christian names are still an insuperable barrier. That is all.
Our Christian names. Is that all?
But we are going to be christened this afternoon.
For me, are you prepared to do this terrible thing?
I am.
To please me, are you ready to face this fearful ordeal?
I am.
How absurd to talk of the equality of the sexes when the matter of self-sacrifice is concerned. Men are infinitely beyond us.
We are.
They have moments of physical courage in which we women know absolutely nothing.
Darling,
Darling.
Lady Bracknell.
Good heavens.
Gwendolyn, what does this mean?
merely that I'm engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Come here. Sit down. Sit down immediately. Hesitation of any kind is a sign of mental decay in the young and of physical weakness in the old. Apprise, sir, to my daughter's sudden flight by her trusty maid, whose confidence I purchased by means of a small coin. I followed her at once by a luggage train. Her unhappy father is, I am glad to say, under the impression that she is attending a more than usually lengthy lecture. I do not mean to undeceive him. Indeed, I have never undeceived him on any question I would consider it wrong. But you must understand that any communication between yourself and my daughter will cease immediately from this moment. On this point, as on all points, I am firm.
I am engaged to be married to Gwendolyn, Lady Bracknell.
You are nothing of the kind. Oh. And now, as regards to Algernon!
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
May I ask if it is in this house in which your invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, resides?
No, Bunbury does not live here. Bunbury is somewhere else at present. In fact, Bunbury is dead.
Dead? When did he die? His death must have been quite sudden.
Oh, I killed Bunbury this afternoon. I mean, Bunbury died this afternoon.
What did he die of?
Bunbury? Oh, he was quite exploded.
Exploded? Was he the victim of a revolutionary outrage? I had no idea that Mr. Bunbury was interested in social legislation. If he was quite well punished for his morbidity.
My dear Aunt Augusta, I quite simply mean he was found out. The doctors discovered that he could no longer live. That is what I mean. So Bunbury died.
He seemed to have great confidence in the opinions of his physicians. However, I am glad that he has made up his mind at last to some definite action and acted under proper medical advice. And now that we have gotten rid of this Mr. Bunbury, Mr. Worthing, may I ask who that young person is whose hand my nephew is holding in what seems to me to be a most unnecessary manner?
That lady is Miss Cecily Cardew, my ward.
I am engaged to be married to Cecily, Aunt Augusta.
I beg your pardon?
Mr. Moncrief and I are engaged to be married, Lady Bracknell.
I do not know if there is anything particularly exciting in the air of this particular part of Hertfordshire, but I think that the amount of engagements that go on here are quite above the average set out by statistics for our guidance. I do not think that some preliminary inquiry on my part would be out of the question. Mr. Worthing, is Miss Cardew in any way affiliated with any of the larger railway stations in London? I merely require information. Until yesterday, I had no idea that there were any families or persons whose origin was a terminus.
Yes. Miss Cecily Cardew is the granddaughter of the late Mr. Thomas Cardew of 149 Belgrave Square, Southwest, Gervais Park, Dorking, Surrey, and the Spooron, 5 Shear N.B.
3 addresses always inspire confidence, even in tradesmen. But what proof do I have of their authenticity?
I have carefully preserved the court guides of the period. They are open to your inspection, Lady Bracknell.
I have known strange errors in that publication.
Miss Cardew's family solicitors are Messrs. Markby, and Markby.
Markby, and Markby, a firm of the highest position in their profession. I have been told that one of the Mr. Markbys is occasionally to be seen at dinner parties. So far, I am satisfied.
Oh, that is extremely kind of you, Lady Bracknell. I also have in my possession, you will be pleased to hear, certificates of Miss Cardew's birth, baptism, whooping cough, registration, vaccination, confirmation, and the measles, both in the German and English variety.
A life crowded with incident, I see, though perhaps somewhat too exciting for a young girl. I am not myself in favor of premature experiences. Come, Gwendolyn, the time for our departure approaches. As a matter of form, Mr. Worthing, I suppose I'd better ask if Miss Cardew has any little fortune.
Yes, only about £130,000 in the funds. That is all, Lady Bracknell. Goodbye. So pleased to have seen you.
A moment, Mr. Worthing. £130,000. And in the funds. Miss Cardew seems to me to be a most attractive young lady, now that I look at her. Few girls of our age have any really solid qualities, the kind that last and improve with time. We live, I regret to say, in an age of surfaces. Come here, sweet child. Your dress is sadly simple, and your hair seems almost as nature might have left it. But that can be easily altered. A thoroughly experienced French maid produces really marvelous results in a very brief space of time. I remember recommending one to the young lady Lansing. After 3 months, her own husband did not know her.
After 6 months, nobody knew her.
Turn around, sweet child. Oh, no, the side view is what I want. Yes. Oh, yes, just as I thought. There are distinct social possibilities in your profile. The two weak points of our age is its want of principle and its want of profile. No, the chin is worn a little higher, dear, yes. Style largely depends on the way a chin is worn, and it is worn very high just at present. Algernon!
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
There are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardew's profile.
Cecily is the sweetest, dearest, prettiest girl I've ever met, and I don't care 2 pence about social possibilities.
Don't speak disrespectfully of society, Algernon. Only people who can't get into it do that. Now, of course you know that Algernon has nothing but his debts to depend on, but I don't believe in mercenary marriages. When I was married to the Lord Bracknell, I had no fortune to speak of, but I never dreamed of letting that get in my way for a moment. Well, I suppose I must give my consent.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Cecily, you may kiss me.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell.
You may call me Aunt Augusta for the future.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
I think that the marriage ought to happen quite soon.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
I'm not myself in favor of long engagements. They give people the opportunity of getting to know each other's character, which I think is never advisable.
I beg your pardon for interrupting you, Lady Bracknell, but you see, this engagement is quite out of the question. I am Miss Cardew's guardian, and she cannot marry without my consent until she comes of age. That consent I decline to give.
Upon what grounds, might I ask? Algernon is an extremely, I might almost say ostentatiously eligible young man. He has nothing, but he looks everything. What more could one desire?
It is very painful for me to have to speak frankly to you about your nephew, Lady Bracknell, but you see, I don't approve of his moral character at all. I suspect him of being untruthful.
Untruthful? My nephew Algernon? Impossible! He is an Oxonian!
I'm afraid there can be no doubt about the matter. You see, this afternoon, while I was gone in London on an important question of romance, he gained admissions into my house under the false pretense of being my brother. Under the assumed name, he drank, I have just been informed, a whole pint bottle of my Perrier Jouet Brut 89, a wine I was specially reserving for myself. Continuing his disgraceful deception, he spent the course of the afternoon alienating the affections of my only ward. Subsequently, he stayed to tea and devoured every single muffin. And what makes his conduct all the more heartless is that from the first, he knew that I didn't have a brother, I don't have a brother, I've never had a brother, and I don't have an intention of ever having a brother. Not of any kind. I distinctly told him so myself yesterday afternoon.
After careful consideration, I have decided to entirely overlook my nephew's conduct to you.
That is extremely generous of you, Lady Bracknell. But my decision, however, is unalterable. I decline to give my consent.
Come here, sweet child. How old are you?
Well, I'm really only 18, but I always admit to 20 when I go to evening parties.
Oh, you are perfectly right in making some slight alteration. No woman should ever be quite accurate about her age. It looks so calculating. 18, but admitting to 20 at evening parties? Well, it will not be long before you are of age and free of the restraints of tutelage. So I do not think that your guardian's consent is a matter of any importance after all.
I beg your pardon for interrupting you again, Lady Bracknell, but I think it is only fair to tell you that according to the terms of Miss Cardew's grandfather's will, she does not come of age until she is 35.
I do not think that that is a grave objection. 35 is a very attractive age. London society is full of women of the highest birth who, of their own free choice, have stayed 35 for years. Lady Templeton is a case in point. She has been 35 ever since she reached the age of 40, which was many years ago now. I see no reason why our dear Miss Cardew will not be any more attractive at the age that you mention than she is at present. There will be an accumulation of property.
Algie, could you wait for me till I was 35?
Of course I could, Cecily. You know I could.
Yes, I felt it instinctively. But I'm afraid I couldn't wait all that time. I hate waiting even 5 minutes for anybody. It always makes me feel rather cross. Although I am not punctual myself, I do like punctuality in others. And waiting, even to be married, is quite out of the question.
Then what is to be done, Cecily?
I don't know, Mr. Moncrief.
As Miss Cardew states that she positively cannot wait until she is 35, something which I am bound to say seems to me to show impatience of character, I beg of you to reconsider your decision.
Yes, well, the matter is entirely in your own hands. The moment you consent to my marriage with Gwendolen, I will gladly allow your nephew to form an alliance with my ward.
You must know that what you propose is out of the question.
Then a passionate celibacy is all that any of us can look forward to.
That is not the life that I propose for Gwendolen. Algernon, of course, can choose for himself. Come, Gwendolen. We have already missed 5, if not 6 trains. To miss any more would expose us to comment on the platform.
Everything is quite ready for the christening.
The christening, sir, is that not somewhat premature?
Both men expressed a desire for immediate baptism.
At their age, the idea is grotesque and irreligious. Algernon, I forbid you to be baptized. Your uncle would be very unhappy if he were to learn that this was the way in which you were wasting your time and money.
Am I to understand there are to be no christenings at all this afternoon, Lady Bracknell?
I don't think, as things are now, it would be of much practical value to either of us, Dr. Truscott.
I'm grieved to hear such sentiments from you, Mr. Worthing. I will return to the church at once. Indeed, I have just been informed by the pew opener that for the last hour and a half, Lady Bracknell has been waiting for me in the vestry.
Lady Bracknell? Did you say Lady Bracknell? That is me.
Excuse me, Miss Prism.
Prism? You mentioned Miss Prism. Pray, allow me to detain you for a moment. This may prove of utmost importance to both I and the Lord Bracknell. this Miss Prism a female of repellent aspect, remotely connected with education?
She is the most cultivated of ladies and the very picture of respectability.
It is obviously the same person. May I ask what position she holds in your household?
I am a celibate, madam.
Miss Prism, Lady Bracknell, has been for the last 3 years Miss Cardew's esteemed governess and valued companion.
Despite what you say, I must speak with her at once. That shall be sent for.
Oh, she approaches now.
I was told you were waiting for me in the vestry, dear Canon. I've been waiting for you there for an hour and 3/4.
Prism? Come here, Prism. Prism, where is that baby? 28 years ago, Prism, you left Lord Bracknell's house, number 104, Upper Grosvenor Street, in charge of a perambulator that contained a baby of the male sex, but you never returned. A few weeks later, through the elaborate investigations of the Metropolitan Police, the perambulator was found, standing at midnight in a remote corner of the Bayswater. It contained a manuscript of a 3-volume novel of more than usually revolting sentimentality. But the baby was not there. Prism, where is that baby?
Lady Bracknell, I admit with shame that I do not know. I only wish that I did. The plain facts of the case are these. On the morning of the day you mention, a day that is forever branded on my memory, I prepared as usual to take the baby out in its perambulator. I had also with me a somewhat old but capacious handbag in which I had intended to place the manuscript of a work of fiction that I've been working on in my few unoccupied hours. In a moment of mental abstraction, for which I can never forgive myself, I deposited the manuscript in the bassinet and placed the baby in the handbag.
Yes, but where did you deposit that handbag?
Do not ask me, Mr. Worthing.
Miss Prism, this is a matter of no small importance to me. I demand on knowing where you deposited the handbag that contained that infant.
I left it in the cloakroom of one of the larger railway stations in London.
What railway station?
Victoria, the Brighton line.
I must retire to my room for a moment. Gwendolyn, wait for me here.
If you're not long, I'll wait for you all my life.
Yes.
What do you think this means, Lady Bracknell?
I dare not even suspect, Dr. Chasuble. I hardly need to tell you that in families of high social standing, coincidences are not supposed to happen. They are hardly considered a thing.
Uncle Jack seems strangely agitated.
Guardian has a very emotional nature.
This noise is very unpleasant. It reminds me of an argument. I dislike arguments of any kind. They are always vulgar and usually convincing.
No, it has stopped now.
I do wish we would come to some conclusion.
The suspense is terrible. I hope it will last.
Is this the handbag you speak of? Think before you speak. The happiness of more than one life depends on your answer.
It appears to be mine. Yes. Here is the injury it received through the upsetting of a Gower Street omnibus in younger and happier days. And here is a stain on the lining caused by the explosion of a temperance beverage. And here on the lock are my initials. I'd forgotten that in an extravagant mood I had had them placed there. The bag is undoubtedly mine. I am so delighted to have it so unexpectedly restored to me. It has been a great inconvenience being without it after all these years.
Yes, well, that handbag is not the only thing restored to you. You see, I was the infant inside of it.
You?
Yes. Mother!
Mr. Worthing, I am unmarried.
Unmarried? Well, I don't deny that that is a serious blow. But who are we to throw stones to one who has suffered? Should not repentance wipe out an act of folly? Why should there be one law for men and another for women? Mother, I forgive you.
Mr. Worthing, there is some error. There is the lady who can tell you who you really are.
Lady Bracknell, I hate to seem inquisitive, but could you kindly inform me on who I am?
I am afraid you will not be altogether pleased with what I have to tell you. You are the son of my poor sister, Mrs. Moncrief, and coincidentally, Algernon's elder brother.
Algy's elder brother! I always knew I had a brother! I always said I had a brother! Cecily, how could you have doubted that I had a brother? Dr. Chasuble, my unfortunate brother. Miss Prism, my unfortunate brother. Gwendolyn, my unfortunate brother. Algy, you better treat me with more respect in the future. You have never treated me like a brother in your entire life.
Not till today, old boy, I must admit. I did my best, however, though I was out of practice.
Darling,
Darling,
Under these strange and unforeseen circumstances, you may kiss your Aunt Augusta.
I am so dazed with happiness I hardly know who I am kissing.
Mr. Worthing. Mr. Moncrief, as I should call you now. After what has just occurred, I feel it is my duty to resign my position in your household. Any inconvenience I may have caused you in your infancy through inadvertently placing you in this handbag, I sincerely apologize for.
Don't mention it. Don't mention anything, dear Miss Prism. And as for leaving us, the suggestion is absurd.
It is my duty to leave. I really have nothing more to teach dear Cecily. In the very difficult accomplishment of getting married, I fear my clever pupil has outstripped her teacher.
A moment. Letitia,
Dr. Chasuble.
I have come to the conclusion that the primitive church was at error on certain points. Corrupt texts must have crept their way into the reading. I beg to solicit the honor of your hand.
Frederick, at the present moment, words fail me to express my feelings. But I will forward you, this afternoon, the last 3 volumes of my diary. These will be able to peruse a full account of the sentiments I had entertained towards you for the past 18 months.
Prism, from your last observation to Dr. Chasuble, I have learned with regret that you have not given up your passion for fiction in 3 volumes. I do hope that you'll be more careful with your husband than you were with your infant charge, and not leave poor Dr. Chasuble lying about in railway stations in handbags or receptacles of any kind.
my own! What town are you? What is your Christian name now that you become someone else?
Well, I had quite forgotten about that point. I suppose your decision is irrevocable.
I never change, except in my affections.
What a noble nature you have, Gwendolyn.
Then the matter better be cleared up at once. Aunt Augusta, a moment. When Miss Prism left me that handbag, had I been christened?
Every luxury that money could buy, including christening, had been lavished on you by your fond and doting parents.
What was my Christian name? Let me know the worst.
Being the eldest, you were of course named after your father.
Yes, but what was my father's Christian name?
I cannot at present recall. I am sure he had one. He was an eccentric man, but only in later years, and that could be attributed to the Indian climate, and indigestion, and marriage, and other things of that sort.
Algy, can you not recollect our father's Christian name?
No, my dear boy, we were never even on speaking terms. He died before I was a year old.
I suppose his name would be in the army list of the period, Aunt Augusta?
The general was essentially a man of peace. except in his domestic life, but I am sure that his name would appear in any military directory.
Yes, well, the records of the last 40 years are here. These delightful records should have been my constant study. Generals, Maxim, Miggs, Mobs, what gossip names they all have. Migsby, Mockby, Moncrief, yes. Lieutenant 1840, Lieutenant Colonel, Colonel General 1869. Christian names. Earnest John.
I remember the general being called Earnest. I knew I had a particular reason for disliking the name.
Wonderful. I have always told you my name was Earnest. Well, it is Earnest. It naturally is.
I felt from the first that you could have no other name.
It is very hard for a man to realize that for his entire life he has been telling nothing but the truth.
I can't, for I feel you're sure to change.
John.
Letitia.
Frederick, at last!
Cecily, at last.
Gwendolyn, at last.
My nephew, it seems to me you're showing signs of triviality.
Oh, on the contrary, Aunt Augusta. I think for the first time in my entire life I've realized the vital importance of being earnest. We have this because of her, and we're just becoming a better tech crew, so thank you so much.
The next one is for Miss Taylor. Thank you so much for giving everyone a better understanding of the play. And I've never met anyone who knew the play so well. So thank you.
And finally, our leader, our fearless director, Miss Goodspeed.
You guys go on.
Thank you.